My mother is demanding that I get rid of my wife's pregnancy because my sister can't have children. But now the only thing being interrupted are her grandmother rights. My sister and I are 3 years apart, but my mother has always treated her like a spoiled little child. I suppose that's why she has become so spoiled, even at her current age. She's now 27 and I'm 30. My wife and I are expecting a baby. We've been married for 2 years, together for 5, and we're very excited about becoming parents. We found out about the pregnancy a couple of months ago and decided to tell our families first before making a big announcement. My wife's family was extremely happy for us, but of course, my mother had to find something negative about it. My father congratulated us and left it at that, but my mother decided to call me a few hours after we told her about the pregnancy to tell me that she didn't think going through with the pregnancy was a good idea. I was really shocked because my mother loves kids, and I knew for sure that she had been very excited about the idea of being a grandmother both at my wedding and at my sister's wedding. So this reaction was quite unexpected. When I asked her why she would say such a thing, she started making up arbitrary reasons why we shouldn't have a baby at this time. She told us it would be a financial strain on us, and even mentioned that since both of us were career-oriented, it would be problematic to decide who would stay home with the baby when we both had to go back to work. I told her that we had already thought about those things and that we had enough savings to take care of a baby since we've been working for a long time. It's not like we were improvising. My wife and I work at the same company, and we both have paid maternity and paternity leave. Plus, when we need to go back to work, we had already thought about hiring nannies or asking for help from family. None of the reasons she gave seemed sufficient to get rid of a pregnancy, and I knew there was something she wasn't telling me, so I kept pressing until she finally told me the truth. Of course, it turned out that all of this was about my sister. Apparently, my dear sister had been planning to get pregnant this year as well, but unfortunately for her, it hadn't happened yet. She was already quite upset about that, and my mother felt that it wasn't the right time for us to have a baby because if we started our pregnancy process at the same time as hers, it would be emotionally draining for her. The thing is, my sister and I don't get along. We used to fight a lot when we lived together, and when I started university and moved out, it was a big relief for both of us. Since we don't get along, I don't care much about what she thinks about certain things, with my wife's pregnancy being one of them. If she can't handle the fact that we're pregnant and she's not, that's her problem, and not something I have to deal with. But of course, my mother loves to make my sister's problems everyone's issue, so I told my mother that it was sad my sister hadn't gotten pregnant yet, even though she had apparently been planning it, but that I wasn't going to get rid of my wife's pregnancy just to spare her feelings. That was an absurd suggestion, and I told her that for her sake, I was going to pretend she never said it, so I could still respect her as a member of my family. However, instead of backing down and letting it go, she decided to push further and started telling me that my sister had been planning to get pregnant for a long time, and she and her husband had been trying, but it just hadn't worked. The news of my wife's pregnancy was going to devastate her, so I needed to be mindful of her feelings and not go through with the pregnancy because it would divide the family. The most concerning thing about all this was that my mother actually thought this was a valid suggestion, that I should get rid of my wife's pregnancy just because my sister would feel hurt. I knew there was no point in arguing with her, so I just said, okay, and hung up, but I only did that because I didn't want to prolong the conversation. I had no intention of doing what she asked. After that, I blocked her everywhere, and even told my father what had happened. He apologized on my mother's behalf and told me he would make sure she didn't try to contact me again. So that's how I handled the situation, and since then, my father has kept his promise and has kept my mother from contacting me for the past 4 months. We've had no contact, and life has been pretty peaceful. We then decided to make a public post on social media announcing our pregnancy because we thought it was finally time to tell everyone, and that's how my sister found out. I don't regret making that post because we wanted to share our happiness with everyone, and we did. If that upset my sister, tough luck for her. And I know it did upset her because a few days ago, she and my mother decided to show up at my house to talk about our family and how we were going to move forward after everything that had happened. To be honest, I never really considered my sister part of my family because she never behaved that way toward me. As I mentioned before, we were never close. After we stopped living together, there was nothing forcing us to stay in touch, so we didn't get involved in each other's lives. We only saw each other at parties during the holidays, and we even invited each other to our weddings, but it was more out of obligation. I was very direct about all this, so I told my sister that I didn't really consider her close or part of my family, so I didn't think it was important to tell her that my wife was pregnant. I also knew for sure that if she had gotten pregnant first, she never would have bothered to tell me first, and I would have found out through social media when she finally decided to post it. As for my mother, I told her that she had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it because what she had said to me when I shared the news of our pregnancy was horrible, and I didn't want that negativity in my life. I told them that even if they were there to apologize and make amends, it would take me time to process everything. I wasn't going to forgive them right then and give them a second chance. I was brutally honest with them because I didn't have the patience to deal with them at that moment. After I finished speaking, my sister broke down in tears and started sobbing in the living room. That surprised me a bit because I didn't think it would affect her so much, given that we had never been close, and I didn't understand why she expected me to be fake and nice to her. My mother comforted her, and she was the one who told me that recently, after planning and trying to get pregnant for almost a year and a half, they came to the conclusion that my sister was dealing with infertility. The doctors couldn't find the cause of why she couldn't get pregnant, and they just had to wait. It was disappointing because, in her mind, she was ready to be a mother, but physically it wasn't possible at that moment. She had broken down when she found out, which happened a couple of weeks ago, and then I posted about my wife's pregnancy, which upset her even more for two reasons. The first reason was that, despite trying, she couldn't get pregnant, and here we were celebrating our first pregnancy. Of course, that made her feel bitter and resentful. The second reason was that she had to find out that her own brother was going to be a father through social media since I didn't contact her in person to tell her. That made her realize how we had grown apart due to our personal differences, and now she wanted to try to make amends. I softened a bit after that, but I still managed to stand my ground. I told them that I appreciated them coming all the way here to try to fix things with me, but I still needed time to process everything and decide if I wanted to give our relationship a chance or not. I also told them that I truly regretted that my sister was infertile and that I hoped she would eventually be able to get pregnant, but at that moment it was impossible for me to prioritize my family because the only thing that mattered to me was my wife and the pregnancy. Everything else could be dealt with later. I didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with both my sister and my mother at the same time, so I asked them to leave and told them I'd think about everything and contact them later. But for now, I thought it was best to leave things as they had been for the last few years. I thought I was being quite fair because I really didn't have the capacity to deal with the two of them, knowing that there was a lot of friction between us. I wasn't in the mood to pretend that everything was happy, even if they had apologized. What my mother had said was horrible, and my sister had also been very distant from me in recent years. Fixing our relationship would require a lot of work, and I wasn't willing to make that effort right now, especially since my wife was pregnant, and I wanted to prioritize her. So I thought it should be obvious. But both of them were offended and started calling me selfish, saying that I was being narcissistic by refusing to forgive them and pretending to be too busy for my family. To be honest, I didn't think it was selfish at all. I think I was simply being honest and putting my family first, and I wasn't going to back down on that. Now they've been trying to reach out to me again, and I just don't know if I should answer or leave things as they are. I wanted to know if I was wrong for this, or if I should have accepted their apology and tried to work things out. What do you think?